last video, we talked about 3-day notices. Now let's cover the exception of this rule. Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, known as the CARES Act, that was passed in 2020, that was responsible for implementing the temporary eviction moratorium during COVID. There was one provision that is still in effect indefinitely. This is across the nation regardless of the state. If your property has a federally backed loan, or your tenant participates in a federally subsidized program, such as Section 8, then you have to provide a 3-day notice to pay and a 30-day notice to quit. This does only apply to non-payment of rent. Please remember, I'm not a lawyer and this is not legal advice. It is always recommended to consult with a lawyer to ensure you comply with federal, state, and local laws, ordinances, and regulations. Okay, let me break this down for you. Let's first talk about who is affected by this. This law affects all properties that have federally backed loans. Examples of federally backed loans are Federal Housing Administration, FHA, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, Government National Mortgage Association, known as Ginnie Mae, the Department of Veterans Affairs, VA loans, Department of Housing and Urban Development, and Department of Agriculture, which are USDA loans. Now, this list is not inclusive, but these are the majority of them. If you're not sure if your loan falls into one of these categories, please contact your lender. This law applies to both single-family and multifamily units equally. This law also applies if your tenant is in a federally subsidized rent assistance program, such as Section 8, Housing Choice Voucher programs, home investment partnership programs, housing opportunities for people with AIDS, community development block programs, Violence Against Women Act, transitional housing for survivors of domestic violence, HUD subsidized low-income housing programs, rural development housing programs, and low-income housing tax credit programs. There are others also, but basically, if anybody is receiving any funds from the government, then the CARES Act applies to you. The other thing to note is if any tenant in your property receives assistance, then your entire property is subject to the CARES Act, including all non-subsidized tenants. But with this in mind, please remember that it's discriminatory to reject a client based on their source of income. I covered this in a previous video on Section 8. So if your property is subject to the CARES Act, what does this mean for you? Under the CARES Act, if you are serving a tenant a notice for non-payment of rent, you would need to serve the 3-day notice to pay. You would also need to serve a 30-day notice to vacate. This means the more time for the tenant to find rental assistance or legal advice before you can start the eviction. Now, I was not able to find a direct answer if you can refuse to accept payment after the 3-day notice has expired. I would definitely consult with your attorney if you do not want to accept the late payment after the 3-day notice. Please like, share, and comment. Let me know if you find this information useful and if there's any other topics you would like me to cover. Thank you. I look forward to working with you in the future. Please reach out if you would like us to manage any properties for you.